Well, listen, thank you so much for listening to another episode of The Right Path to Retirement with financial advisor Jimmy Lin. He is the president and founder of Right Path Wealth Management. You can find him online at rightpathtoretirement.com. My name is Jeff Miles, and we're gonna jump into some of the basics here today, Jimmy. First of all, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Jeff. How are you?
Very good. I know that you're preparing today, and I'll just kind of give people a timestamp on the show today. It's August 22nd, 2024. I know you've got a seminar coming up a little bit later today. Before we jump into the topic of what a 401k is today, tell me a little bit about like how the seminar goes and what kind of stuff you'll be doing later on with that.
Sure. It's probably very similar to what we're going to be going today as far as, talking about the basics. So today's topic at our seminar is going to be over Social Security and also tax strategies. But we really start with a Social Security 101, who qualifies, how are your payments calculated, different scenarios where if you're a divorced spouse or a surviving spouse, how are those payouts figured out. And so it really is providing that foundational information. And then it creates rabbit holes, for the people that attend, they hear something that they weren't aware of, and then they may do some research on their own, or they may schedule an appointment with us to kind of dig deeper into that. So we really believe that providing people with that foundational information will then trigger that need to go deeper in, whether it's Social Security or like today, what we're talking about with the 401k. We just really want to educate people and provide that foundational knowledge.
So I'm just curious, how often do you do the seminars?
I probably do about 4 a month.
Oh, wow.
Between Henderson and Summerlin. We cover a variety of topics, estate planning, taxes, Social Security. So really anything related to what people are going to be seeing in retirement and any of those roadblocks that they might see and how to address those.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, listen, if you're listening to the podcast right now and you're thinking about, everything Jimmy's saying right now, I could use some knowledge on that. Go to the website. You can find out more even about these seminars at rightpathtoretirement.com. Jimmy, is there a place for people? Can they sign up on the website, or do they just reach out to you?
They can call our office. We have so many scheduled that the easiest way to get on the list is to call our office directly. That's 702-805-7000, and we can get them signed up for one.
Okay, perfect. Well, listen, let's segue right into today's topic. And I would imagine you'll probably end up with this as a topic in a seminar, and that's, the basics of 401k. When we are younger and we're, getting into our careers and things like that, you sign on with that job that you've been dreaming of, and you get the benefits package, right? And you're supposed to check all the boxes, which health insurance plan you want, which dental plan you want. Do you want that long-term disability plan? Do you want any life insurance through the company, things like that? But then there's the 401k question. And there is, the possibility of, how much do you want to contribute? How much do you want to be putting into this account for yourself every year? What are the limits on what that is, which change, from time to time and year to year? The one thing that I will say about 401ks for many people is that as much as you get as far as the information from your employer, it's not near enough for you to understand that this 401k that you signed up for, that you're putting money into, and hopefully your employer's kind of throwing some bones to you too, it's long-term. It goes all the way until retirement as a plan for you to really kind of set yourself up to be able to enjoy a nice and fruitful retirement. So Jimmy, on the 401k, let's just talk about the fact that you've got, let's say, $100,000 in this 401k, and you are 55 years old, and you're thinking to yourself, all right, I got $100,000 over here. I know I've got Social Security that I've got, set up for retirement as well. And, I've been doing some investing over here in this other account a little bit. And so I guess when I retire, I've got that $100,000 waiting for me in that 401k. Is that how it works?
It's not necessarily that simplified, but unfortunately, a lot of people, they believe they've done the right thing, which most of them have. I remember that moment when I got my first job and I made some decisions, and I don't even remember the decisions I made. It was so long ago, right? So
most of us probably don't.
Right. But it's almost like you are signing a 40-year contract, because you're a 20-year-old. You're making decisions for money that you generally don't want to access until you're at least 59 and a half. So it is pretty important to understand the purpose of the 401k and how it fits into your entire financial plan. And generally speaking, the 401k, if you look at the starting point, the 401k actually happened by accident, right? Prior to the 401k, most businesses, they had pension plans. So they'd create these pension plans. You'd generally stay with the company for 30 to 40 years. You'd retire, and all of a sudden the company would pay you out this pension that just lasted you the rest of your life. The 401k actually came about. It's actually just a code within a piece of legislation that said that if you started saving for retirement, that money would be tax deferred, and any of the money you contributed wouldn't be taxed, and the gains would be tax deferred as well. And so it was really a way for executives to be able to put aside additional money on top of their pension. But companies got kind of wise. Everybody's trying to cut money from the bottom line or increase the bottom line, so cut their budgets. So what they did was they shifted the onus of your retirement from the company, the employer, to the employee. But there wasn't a real big meeting with all the employees saying, hey guys, now it's your responsibility to make sure you save and make sure that you make the right decisions so that this money grows. It just kind of shifted really in the early 80s. And so what happens is a lot of people, like you described, they get their first job and you're kind of not really educated on what you do. You just make your best guess about how much you want to contribute, and you're just, they have a bunch of different allocations, and you're just basically picking randomly and hoping you're making the right decisions. And oftentimes those decisions stay with you because not many people review those allocations on an ongoing basis. So whatever you made with the information you had as a 20-year-old, that may be the same allocation you have as a 35 or 40-year-old. So it's important to understand, the basics of that. But essentially, the purpose of the 401k, as I stated, was really the biggest benefit is tax deferral. So if you make $100,000, but you contribute, say, $20,000 to your 401k, well, now you're not taxed on $100,000. They're going to reduce that contribution that you made. So now your salary, as far as the way the IRS sees it, is $80,000. So you're going to be taxed less because your salary is reduced because they've shifted some of that money into your retirement account. And then the beauty of that also is that any gains that grow over the next 20, 30, 40 years, all of that is tax deferred. So if that 20,000 turns into 100,000, you're not paying taxes on a year by year basis. But that's kind of a false sense of security, because when you do retire, you are going to have to pay those taxes. So it's really a calculation, Jeff, about determining what your taxes might be in the future versus paying the taxes now. So that's kind of the analysis a lot of people have to take to determine how much they want to contribute. There's some basic rules in place. Every year there's some contribution limits. So in 2024, you can contribute up to $23,000 to a 401k. And if you're over 50, there's a catch up, so you can contribute another $7,500. So they're very generous on how much you can contribute. The main thing to look for is there are company matches. So a company, typically this is their contribution for replacing the pension that you used to have, was there generally is a percentage that a company will match of what you've contributed, right? So as a simple example, if someone makes $200,000 and they're contributing 6% to their 401k, well, that's $12,000 that the employee is contributing. Most common thing I've seen out there, but all the plans are different, is maybe a 50% match from the company up to 6%. So if I contributed 6%, I'm contributing $12,000. My company may match it with up to 50% of that. So that's $6,000 that they're going to contribute. So that's $6,000 of free money. So as a starting point, I always tell people, start off with contributing up to the company match.
Yeah.
And then after that point, you want to evaluate the situations because there are other investment vehicles that you can go into. So you really kind of want to use that as your starting point and then look at your overall situation.
So everything that you're saying right now, I'm literally looking back on reading the literature that you get from the company on, how their 401k program works and things like that. And, I remember seeing, employment contracts where, company will, allow you to participate in their 401k program. And, the company matches 50% of whatever you contribute up to 6% of your salary. And, for a lot of people, and this was me when I was like much younger, and I wasn't like, you graze through that information. It just kind of like flies right by your face and you're thinking, all right, cool. Well, 50%, that sounds pretty good. Free money. I'll take that. And you're thinking to yourself, okay, but up to the 6% of my salary. At the time I was like, I don't even know what that means, but I'm just going to throw in money of what I think I can put into this thing anyway. And the reason I bring that part up is because, if you look at up to 6% of your annual salary, for some people that may not max out your 401k contribution that you're able to even put in. Whereas when you hear many people out there who literally tell you that you should max out your 401k every single year, I started thinking about it one day and I was like, well, hang on just a second. If it's 6% of my annual salary that they will match, then that means that, like you use the example of, if I make $100,000, they're going to match 6% of that. And if I put in, $12,000, then I've now hit the max of what they're going to contribute to that 401k program that I've got, right? And so that means I've put in $12,000. But then you said, well, but the max that I can contribute is $23,000 in a year. So I'm actually only like halfway to that point of maxing out what my contributions could be for my 401k. Am I looking at that correctly? Does that math add up?
Well, no, you're 100% correct on that, and I think it's a little simplistic. We hear it all the time, as you stated. You should max out your 401k, but you don't really have all the information at hand. So that's a really simplistic way of looking at your investments, because depending on your situation, that may not be the most optimal strategy, right? So depending on where your annual salary falls, it may make more sense to contribute to your 401k up to the limit that your company matches. Right. Then shift some of your additional your salary into a Roth IRA, for example, because there are income limits on a Roth IRA. So you may want to shift over some of your money so that you can contribute to that Roth IRA, because a Roth IRA you're going to put after-tax money in, but that money will grow tax-free. And when you pull it out in retirement, it will be taxed. So the growth is tax-free and distributions come out tax-free. So for many out there listening, their scenario may make sense to where you contribute so you get that free money, that company match. Mm-hmm. Then a portion of your additional money that you may have available could go into a Roth IRA. And then if you still have extra money, you can then come back and figure out how much more can you afford to put into that 401k because you will get that salary tax deferral. So it goes back to what we've talked about in previous shows, is giving every dollar a job, right? Being intentional about the money that's coming in, the hard-earned money that you're working for every single day. Don't just listen to somebody say, max out your 401k, and you just blindly follow that, because it may not be the most efficient way. What's happening is you're building up this nest egg in your 401k. And I see this time and time again. People meet with me and they're like 6 years old. They've done the right thing. They maxed out their 401k, but now they're coming into our office with $1-2 million all in tax deferred accounts. That essentially is what we call a tax bomb, right? Yeah. So instead of having, there's something called, asset allocation, making sure that when you do your investments, you're kind of allocated. So you have some bonds, maybe some aggressive stocks. That's some diversification in your investments. Well, you also want tax diversification, right? So having that 401k is great because over your career, you're paying less taxes. But then you're going to have this tax bomb in retirement. If you kind of shift some of your money into, say, a Roth IRA, if it makes sense in your situation, now you have some diversification in how you're going to be taxed in retirement, and you have different buckets of money that you can pull from that have different tax implications. And so it gives you more levers to pull. And I say all that to say that for some people, it may make total sense to max out your 401k, because if you are a high earner, you may not qualify for a Roth IRA to begin with. And you're paying so much in taxes right now that reducing your taxes is going to be beneficial for you now, rather than because in your retirement years, in theory, you may be in a lower tax bracket. Now, that's a whole nother discussion, because do I believe that for a lot of people? I don't believe that may be the case. I think that's kind of a myth that's been created. But generally speaking, in certain situations, it could be 100% optimal to max out your 401k. So you really have to have a true analysis of your situation to figure out what's going to make most sense in your situation.
I'm going to play like we're in a class right now, and the professor is going to pose a hypothetical here real quick, right? So my company pays me, let's say they pay me, a pretty good salary. So I make $135,000 a year. They're going to match what I contribute to my 401k, 50% of what I put in, up to 6% of my salary. To your point about how it works for some, but maybe not necessarily for everyone. I'm 30 years old. That means I've still got at least another, 30 years of really good working years. Chances are, if I'm smart and I do well with my career, my income is going to increase over that course of time. So depending on where that, and this is why I think people really need to pay attention to what they're doing with their 401k. I'm 30 years old. I'm single. I make $135,000 a year. Depending on where my tax bracket is, right? Once I've kind of bumped my income down a tax bracket by using my 401k to put, tax deferred dollars into that account, and I've hit the max of what my company is going to contribute as well. But I still have room where I can still add money into my 401k, but it's not really doing anything for me in that tax deferral strategy, so to speak. Is that a situation where maybe you look at it and you say, you know what, I've bumped down to the lower tax bracket, but anything I contribute from this point forward is not going to get me any closer to going down another tax bracket, let's say. And so instead, maybe I use this money to put into a Roth account, or something that is, not a tax deferred account, where by the time I hit 60 years old, 62, 63 years old, and I've accumulated all of this wealth, like you said, in that 401k, this is now, as you described, a tax bomb, because of the fact that, and I know this is going to sound crazy to people listening to this podcast, it's almost like you got too much money in there. And because eventually you're going to hit that RMD question of, okay, now I have to start taking money out. And the way that those RMDs kind of work for you as well is it's kind of set up on a calendar, so to speak, of number of years that you have to take it, So you start at say, whatever that, RMD age is. And then you've got so many years where you have to, for lack of a better term, deplete that account. Do people understand all of this part of the 401k when they're coming to talk to you? Because everything that I just described in this scenario is absolutely common, yet it sounds so complicated.
That's an everyday occurrence, and I have discussions with this every single day with people where, again, they've done the right things, they've worked hard, they were successful, and they were diligent about putting money away, right? They didn't just take their full paycheck and go buy a sports car or anything like that. They knew that they had to plan for retirement. So that's step one, is doing the right thing. I love the 401k in the sense that it is an automatic forced savings account, right? So that's a great thing. And it's created a lot of wealth for the people that I've met. But the problem, as you described it, is that if there was not proactive planning, then you have this tax bomb. So I say all the time in our seminar, if you don't have a tax plan, you don't have to worry about it, right? Because the government has a tax plan for you, and it's the RMD, right? And people laugh because they know it's true. Most people don't have a tax plan. And when they come into your office after working hard for 30, 40 years, and I'll look at these statements, and they may have $2 or $3 million. And I tell them straight in the face, is like, you've been very blessed. You've worked hard. You did all the right things, but you have a tax bomb on your hands, right? Because as soon as they hit that required minimum distribution age, they are having to forcefully take money out, amounts that they may not need. They may have already paid off their house, so they don't really need a lot of income in retirement. Government doesn't care because they need to start collecting those tax dollars. So once you turn on those RMDs, it's a faucet that does not stop. So, when you turn on that faucet, it never stops. Every single year, you are forced to take money out of those accounts. And typically, every year, that number increases because the way the RMDs work is it's based on a life expectancy chart. So every year you get older, the government requires you take just a little bit more out of those accounts. So by the time you reach your late 70s, there can be a significant amount that's being pulled out of those accounts. And what some people don't factor in is all those distributions count as ordinary income. Now, ordinary income, the amount that you show, affects a couple of things that people don't realize. It affects how much of your Social Security benefits are going to be taxable. Right. It also can affect how much you pay on Medicare Part B premiums. And it could, like your Medicare Part B premiums, it could literally triple or quadruple, close to quadruple what you pay in Part B premiums. So I always tell people, if you have the opportunity to get ahead of managing your tax situation before those RMDs hit, you want to have some type of tax plan so that you avoid a lifetime of Medicare Part B premium surcharges or a lifetime of paying more in your Social Security than really is required. And the earliest time to be able to plan for that obviously is in your 20s, 30s, or 40s. It's never too late. We work with people all the time in their 50s and 60s, and we create a tax plan for them. But the earlier the better, just like in investing, the earlier you do it, the better. The earlier you have a tax plan, the better. And so having a situation where you have that 401k, you have that company match, and then you look at things like a Roth IRA or even within your own company, oftentimes companies now have a Roth 401k option, right? Sure. So that essentially is you're putting those dollars in there that you've already paid taxes on, but you are going to get that benefit. You're not going to get that benefit of reducing your salary. But what you are going to get the benefit is all the growth in that account is going to be tax-free. So when you go into retirement, you pull money out, it is going to be completely tax-free. And in fact, the government will never force you to pull money out of those accounts, unlike a 401k, right? So your 401k, when you reach that RMD age, whether you need that money or not, you have to start liquidating assets and pulling that money out. If you have that money in a Roth 401k or a Roth IRA, you will never be forced to liquidate those assets. You can let that grow and do whatever you want with it, whether it be spending it down later in life or passing it on to your heirs.
So if you're listening right now and everything you just heard made you think to yourself, wait a minute, I thought I was doing all the right things, and I'm going to be penalized for doing all of the right things, quote unquote, in all these years leading up to retirement, and now I'm going to be penalized for it. I feel the same way you do. Because if you're listening right now and that's what you're feeling, I feel the same way you do. Because, Jimmy, everything that you just described makes me feel like, okay, the system's working against me down the road. Let me remind people that a 401k, the actual title of it is Tax Code 401k. That should tell you right there that this was written by the IRS and the people who create the tax codes. So understand that, yes, as much as you can use it to your benefit, it is absolutely there to also benefit the IRS down the road at some point in time.
And Jeff, one thing is we all know that the tax code is fluid, right? It's not written in pen. So one thing I always tell people, I never try to overstep my bounds as far as telling people where tax rates are going to be. I don't know where tax rates are going to be 10 or 20 years from now. Nobody does, right?
Sure.
What I do know is that as of January of this year, we had $34 trillion in debt. So it seems to me that something has to happen, and we can either spend less as a country or raise taxes. And whenever I ask that question of what's more likely in our seminars, 100% of the people, they actually just laugh because they know there's only one answer, which is
I'm laughing too because
right?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's all about just using common sense. And so, like I said, there's kind of been a myth that, if you're paying taxes now in your working years, you're probably paying more because you have a higher salary. I don't know how true that is because of the fact that now that people are proactively saving and building up these retirement accounts, when you get those distributions out, I mean, it may be close to the same amount that you were making during your working years.
For some,
or
it may
even
be
if it's
more.
less, taxes might be higher than they are now. So
exactly,
limiting that exposure to tax policy is just another way of limiting risk. So we try to limit our risks sometimes in our investments. There's also tax risk. And so being able to have more of that diversification in your tax buckets can limit the amount of tax risks that you face in retirement.
Well, listen, Jimmy, you have explained a lot. You've given me a lot to think about. I'm sure people listening to this podcast have a lot to think about as well. And listen, if you want more information about how your 401k is going to work, how to make sure you're maximizing the benefits for you when it comes to your 401k, reach out to Jimmy, president and founder, Right Path Wealth Management. You can go online at rightpathtoretirement.com. Again, that's rightpathtoretirement.com. And Jimmy, I know you've got a seminar later on today, but that phone number again, if people want to sign up for seminars that are coming up in the future, what is that again?
Yeah, 702-805-7000. And we could definitely get them signed up for future events.
Okay, perfect. Well, listen, my name is Jeff Miles, and for Jimmy Lin, thank you so much for listening to the Right Path to Retirement podcast. We've got more episodes coming your way. Make sure you are subscribed. Make sure you have the notifications turned on so you'll be notified when we've got new content coming your way. In the meantime, thank you so much for listening. Have an awesome day, and we will talk to you next time. Insurance products are offered through the insurance business Right Path Wealth Management. Right Path Wealth Management is also an investment advisory practice that offers products and services through Impact Partnership Wealth, LLC, IPW, a registered investment advisor. IPW does not offer insurance products. The insurance products offered by Right Path Wealth Management are not subject to investment advisor requirements. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims-paying abilities of the issuing carrier. This podcast is intended for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual situation. Right Path Wealth Management is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during this show shall constitute tax or legal advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. The information and opinions contained herein provided by third parties have been obtained by sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by Right Path Wealth Management.